personally, I feel like this, one of the best prelims on this card between Jim Miller, A10, and Hot Sauce Scott Holtzman at 155 pounds. Matt, there's all sorts of different levels to this fight. I mean, Scott Holtzman, typically, if he's going to win a fight, more than likely it's going to be by decision. Yes, he has some finishes on his record, but typically a better striker than a lot of his opponents. And his last fight against Dun Hyun Ma really put him on blast in that one and looked great. And against Southpaws in the UFC, which he's facing here, he's 2-1. That one loss, though, to Josh Emmett. And Josh Emmett, you can compare to Jim Miller in certain ways. I mean, Josh Emmett, a very good wrestler. Jim Miller, a very good grappler. Josh Emmett, very power heavy. Jim Miller, not so much. That's where the comparison ends. But he does have power. Long in the tooth. That's where this fight gets squirrely and very interesting. I'm going to read you some numbers quickly. Scott Holtzman, 36 years old. Jim Miller, 36 years old. Jim Miller has 45 professional fights. Scott Holtzman only has 16. Jim Miller made his debut in 2005. Scott Holtzman made his debut in 2012. Go ahead, Matt.
It's kind of like over the weekend at the UFC when Halle Berry was in the front row and everyone was freaking out because, fun fact, Halle Berry's a year older than Joe Rogan, and you would not know that to look at them. And this fight's very similar.
That's what testosterone does.
Yes, exactly. This fight's kind of hard on Scott Holtzman. They're not really doing him any favors with this matchmaking. When you look at his last loss to Nick Lentz just kind of a smaller version of Jim Miller. And I know Jim Miller, a lot of sort of more recent fans just kind of know him as, kind of up-and-coming contenders beat him. Poirier, Pettis, not even up-and-coming, but the really elite of the elite fighters can beat Jim Miller. I don't know if Scott Holtzman's at that level yet. When you look at Holtzman, you got to think, okay, if Dustin Poirier can beat Jim Miller, and even he had quite a bit of trouble with Miller, what's Scott Holtzman going to be able to do? The leg kicks are going to be a factor, I think. Holtzman's going to need a finish in this fight, and if you're really betting on finishing Jim Miller, it's probably not the right way to go. In that 4-fight losing streak he went on, where he fought Dustin Poirier, Anthony Pettis, Francisco Trinaldo, and Dan Hooker, only one of them ended up getting a stoppage victory over him, and there was a terrible eye poke right before it. So I feel like Jim Miller just has more ways to win, and eventually he's going to be able to sort of find a path to victory.
The weird thing in Jim Miller's last 3 fights, you look at it, the loss to Charles Oliveira, who's on an absolute heater.
Jeez.
Then he beats Jason Gonzalez. What does that really tell you? And then he goes out there, and it's a weird fight where he cracks Clay Guida, and then he finishes him with a submission, which was awesome to see, awesome. But what does it tell you? I mean, wins over Jason Gonzalez and Clay Guida, and for Scott Holtzman, he's looked good recently, and I mean, in his UFC tenure, only 3 losses. Nick Lentz, like you said, Josh Emmett, and Drew Dober. And we've seen it from Emmett and from Dober. They could be top 15 fighters. We know that for sure from Josh Emmett. And Drew Dober in his last fight against a really tough out in Nazar Haqparast looked great. So in this one, Matt, odds are close. Holtzman, minus 145 favorite. Jim Miller, plus 120. And you look over at those Tapology metrics, and that's where it gets a little squirrely. Out of 583 voters, 67% going with Jim Miller, 70% saying he's going to win by submission. How do you see this one?
I feel like if Miller can get the fight to the ground, really at any point, it's not one of those cases where they're pretty close at grappling, so okay, maybe Miller might be a little better. If he gets him down early, they're not sweaty, he'll be able to go for a choke. Jim Miller, no matter where this fight is going to have the grappling advantage. That's the one hole in Scott Holtzman's game that he hasn't been able to shore up. He's got big power. He hurts his opponents, then he kind of coasts for that last round, but the problem is we don't really know where Jim Miller's chin's at either. And Jim Miller, like you said, he's fought so many times. Even at his advanced age with the Lyme disease, like it seems like Jim Miller fights at least once every other month. And it is nice to see the activity, just if you are a fan. I think he's going to win this fight. I wouldn't be surprised if Holtzman can pull off a knockout victory, but I do feel like Miller's going to be able to get the fight to the mat at some point. He's going to win by rear naked choke.
Hot Sauce is a cool nickname. I think Jim Miller is going to be able to get it done in this one for the same reason that you said. I mean, I think the grappling abilities is really going to be that sweet spot. And yeah, if Holtzman can crack him early, or if Holtzman can turn up the volume, the only thing you have to worry about, again, is Jim Miller's grappling and his pressure. And we saw it in the fight against Clay Guida. All of a sudden, he can swing hands.
And Jim Miller's tougher than a $2 stake, too. Like, it's not going to be easy to get him out of there through Scott Holtzman. I think this has Fight of the Night written all over it, just due to both guys' styles, and I'm very excited for this
Will it be hot sauce poured over $2 deer steak, or will the $2 deer steak win out? We will find out in the prelim portion of UFC Rio Rancho, and you're not going to want to miss the rest of our predictions for the card. Here for Fight Night Picks on YouTube, Matt. Let's get into it.